Danielle, a 24-year-old black woman with dreams far beyond the polished floors she walked each night, adjusted her name tag as she stepped out of the kitchen doors. Her hair was tied in a neat bun, her apron crisp, her posture proud. She had just finished her bachelor's in sociology, with honors, and was saving every tip to apply for grad school. Working nights at one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and more importantly, it taught her about people. Tonight was like any other, until table 14. They came in with the presence of royalty. The host whispered their name, Victor Langford, as if announcing a king. A tech billionaire, hedge fund titan, and regular front-page face on business magazines. Known for his ruthless mergers and even more ruthless tongue. He wore a navy silk suit that probably cost more than Danielle's annual rent. Sitting beside him were two suited men, executives probably, and a young blonde woman who looked too nervous to speak. Danielle approached the table with the same polite warmth she gave every guest. "Good evening, welcome. May I offer you a selection of wines or sparkling water to begin?" Victor cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Just water." She nodded and turned to pour. Her fingers were steady. Her mind focused. But as she reached to place the glass in front of him, a sudden movement, someone shifted their chair, threw her off balance for a split second. The glass slipped from her tray and tipped slightly forward. A splash of cold water hit the billionaire's cuff and the edge of his jacket. Time slowed. Victor's face twisted into disgust. He pushed his chair back with force. "What the hell is wrong with you?" His voice boomed loud enough for the nearby tables to jolt. Gasps followed. Danielle froze. Her cheeks flushed. "I'm so sorry, sir," someone nudged. He stood, dabbing furiously with his napkin. "Sorry. Sorry. You people are always sorry. You can't even serve a damn glass of water without turning it into a disaster." The word stung. Not just because of the insult, but because of the loaded silence that followed. No one said a word. Not the manager who peeked out from the kitchen door. Not the hostess. Not the customers pretending to be absorbed in their plates. Just silence, like complicit shadows watching history repeat itself. Victor wasn't done. "Do you even belong in a place like this? What are you doing here? Charity hire?" Danielle swallowed hard. Her eyes began to sting, but she blinked fast. "No. Not here. Not for him." Her tray now weighed like bricks. Her hands shook, not from fear, but fury barely contained. Years of quiet racism. Years of being polite. Years of swallowing pain. This time would be different. Danielle stood there, tray in hand, heart pounding, but her face didn't flinch. She had learned how to hide emotion in spaces like this, how to swallow indignity with grace. But tonight, something was different. The words the billionaire had thrown at her still hung heavy in the air. "You people. Do you even belong here?" The weight of centuries was packed into that one sentence. Danielle felt it deep in her chest. She glanced around. A table of older white diners nearby sat frozen, their forks hovering in midair. Two women across the room lowered their wine glasses. The pianist, noticing the shift in mood, awkwardly transitioned into a soft improvisation. Even the waitstaff, her co-workers, didn't move. It was as if they all collectively decided it was safer to pretend they hadn't heard. But they had heard. Everyone had. She looked toward the manager, Greg, standing behind the bar. His lips parted slightly, unsure if he should step in. His eyes met hers for a second, but then quickly dropped to the floor. He stayed put. Typical. She had worked with Greg for 2 years. He called her kiddo and said she was one of his best servers. But when it mattered most, when she needed even the smallest show of solidarity, he chose silence. That silence. It was louder than Victor Langford's shouting. Danielle's fingers curled tighter around the tray. A part of her wanted to flee to the back, into the sanctuary of the staff lounge where she could breathe again. But another part of her, the part that had marched with her grandmother during protests in Brooklyn, the part that studied the civil rights movement, that read Maya Angelou under covers as a child, stood rooted. She had every right to be here. She didn't need to explain herself to anyone, especially not a man drunk on his wealth and entitlement. The young blonde woman at Victor's table looked visibly uncomfortable. Her eyes flicked between Danielle and the billionaire. She opened her mouth to say something, but hesitated. Then she lowered her gaze, folding her hands in her lap. Danielle scanned the restaurant one more time. Still no one said a word. So many eyes. So much silence. She could feel them all watching, all waiting. And that's when something shifted in her chest, not shame, but clarity. Not fear, but resolve. Her father once told her, they might try to strip your dignity, but they can never take your voice. That's yours. That's power. Danielle took a breath. She steadied her shaking hands. Her pulse slowed. Her shoulders rolled back, chin lifted, and for the first time that evening, she wasn't just a waitress. She was a woman standing on the shoulders of giants. Of ancestors who endured far worse without the luxury of an audience. And with that, she stepped forward. She was done being silent. Danielle stepped forward, not timidly, not cautiously, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had just made a decision. The tray was no longer in her hands. She had set it aside without even realizing it. All eyes were on her now, not just Victor Langford's, but the entire dining room. Her voice would not tremble. She looked him straight in the eye. Her tone was calm, but it carried a weight that made it impossible to ignore. My grandfather built this place, she said. Victor blinked, confused. What? Danielle didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The room had gone utterly still. This restaurant. The marble under your shoes. The arches above your head. He carved those with his own hands, back when he wasn't allowed to eat here. A ripple of whispers moved through the room. Victor opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Danielle held his gaze, not with hate, but with something deeper, truth. You walk in here thinking you own the world because you have money. But money only buys a seat. It doesn't buy respect. And it sure doesn't erase history. Victor shifted in his chair. He wasn't used to being spoken to this way. Certainly not by a young black woman. His smug expression faltered, replaced with something rare, discomfort. You think I don't belong? Danielle said, one eyebrow raised. Sir, I carry the legacy of the people who laid these foundations while being told they were less than. I serve with dignity not for a paycheck, but for them. You don't scare me. Silence. There was a kind of electricity in the air, a spark that seemed to catch fire inside every person in that restaurant. The diners who had been pretending not to hear suddenly couldn't look away. The young woman at the table stared, wide-eyed. The executives beside Victor looked down into their drinks, unsure of what to do. Victor tried to speak again, but Danielle had already stepped back. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. One sentence, delivered with grace and truth, had done what no shouting ever could. And then something unexpected happened. The older woman at the corner table clapped. Softly at first. Then her husband joined. Then another couple. And another. Within seconds, the sound swelled through the room like a wave. Not a standing ovation, not yet, but a spontaneous acknowledgement of courage. Danielle looked around once, then down at her apron. She untied it gently and laid it on the table. She had said what needed to be said. She didn't need to stay another second. As she turned to walk toward the back, the applause followed her, soft, strong, and full of something she hadn't expected that night, justice. Danielle didn't look back as she walked toward the kitchen doors, but she could feel the applause rising behind her. It wasn't theatrical. It wasn't for show. It was slow, honest, and filled with something deeper than admiration, respect. Her steps were steady. Her back was straight. Each footfall on the marble floor her grandfather had once laid felt like a homecoming. Victor Langford sat frozen. His hand still held the damp napkin, now limp and forgotten. The fire in his face had vanished, replaced by a pale, stunned stillness. For a man used to controlling boardrooms and intimidating billion-dollar executives, being rendered speechless by a young waitress was a first, and a blow his ego didn't see coming. The men seated with him avoided eye contact. The one on the left shifted uncomfortably and checked his phone, pretending to be distracted. The other simply stared into his wine glass like it might offer him a way out of the awkwardness. And the young woman who had come in with them, quiet until now, rose from her seat. She didn't look at Victor. She didn't say a word. She just stood. And then, in front of everyone, she placed her napkin neatly on the table and followed Danielle toward the back of the restaurant. Gasps swept across the room again. Victor turned sharply. "Where are you going?" She didn't answer. He rose halfway out of his chair, but then sat back down, defeated. He had lost his voice in more ways than one. At the bar, Greg the manager finally stirred, stepping forward as if to chase Danielle or somehow smooth things over. But the sight of the crowd clapping, people smiling, nodding, proud, stopped him mid-step. He realized something that chilled him to the core: if he said anything now, he'd be the one out of place. Near the entrance, a man in a tailored gray suit stood and looked toward the kitchen with a thoughtful expression. He whispered something to his wife, who nodded slowly. The pianist, unsure of what to do, resumed playing, a soft, reflective melody that matched the mood. It wasn't jazz anymore. It was something quieter. Something reverent. In the kitchen, Danielle exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. The young woman who had followed her was standing near the swinging door. "That," she said softly, "was the bravest thing I've ever seen." Danielle offered her a tired smile. "It wasn't brave. It was overdue." The girl nodded. "I came in here thinking I was with someone powerful. But, turns out, I wasn't." And with that, she left, this time through the front door. Back in the dining area, something had shifted. The air was clearer, heavier, wiser. People didn't just return to their meals. They sat differently. Spoke differently. Looked at the waitstaff with a little more humanity. Danielle may have left the room, but her words didn't. They stayed. Danielle didn't return to her shift that night. She didn't have to. By morning, the moment had already left the walls of the restaurant and spread across the internet. A diner had discreetly recorded the entire confrontation: Victor Langford's cruel outburst, Danielle's unwavering poise, and her final, unforgettable line. "My grandfather built this place. Your money only rents it." The video went viral within hours. Across social media, hashtags like #DanielleSpeaks and #BuiltByBooker trended. People were moved not only by what she said, but by how she said it. With grace, history, and unapologetic truth. Celebrities reposted it. Scholars quoted it. Civil rights organizations reached out. Her inbox filled with interview requests, speaking invitations, job offers, even a full scholarship from a historically black university that had seen the clip and recognized her brilliance. But Danielle didn't chase cameras. She had always wanted to build something, not for attention, but for justice. So, she founded the Booker Foundation, named after her grandfather Elijah Booker, the black craftsman who had helped construct that very restaurant during a time when he couldn't walk through the front door. The foundation focused on empowering black youth entering the hospitality and service industries, offering them scholarships, legal protections, and leadership training. Her first official speech was modest, held in a community center with folding chairs and standing room only. On the wall behind her hung a black and white photo of her grandfather, smiling, holding a chisel in his hand. "My grandfather's hands carved beauty into places that wouldn't welcome his face," Danielle said to a tearful crowd. "And yet, he built anyway. Because legacy isn't permission, it's purpose." Her words became the heartbeat of the movement that followed. Weeks later, the same restaurant that once stood in silence as she was humiliated hung a permanent plaque at its entrance. It read, "In honor of Elijah Booker and all the hands that built without applause. We see you now. Victor Langford." He released a short statement through a PR firm. It was full of polished apologies and scripted remorse. But the damage to his brand was already done. Several companies severed partnerships, and stockholders demanded accountability. For the first time in his career, he was forced to sit and listen. As for Danielle, she never returned to serving tables. Instead, she served something greater. Truth, memory, and a voice for those still silenced. One night, as she stood on stage at a youth summit, a young girl in the front row raised her hand and asked, "Weren't you scared when he yelled at you?" Danielle smiled gently. "Of course," she said. "But fear doesn't mean silence. It means the moment matters. And when it matters, you speak." That one sentence, that night, had changed everything. Not just for her, but for everyone who ever wondered if they belonged.